Hello Unreal Engine games designers and developers. In our continuing series on this desert driving game, we're going to create some random spawning gates so that our drivers have an objective in the game to drive through, and in a future tutorial we'll show how to do scoring for this as well. So without any further ado, let's get started. Welcome back everybody to our desert driving game series, and today we're going to look at creating some objectives for our vehicles. So I'm going to create a gate system which spawns random gates around the desert, and the first player who gets to the gate will score the point. It'll destroy the gate and then spawn a new random gate somewhere else in the map. Now if you've only just arrived at this series, this is the first video you've seen, then look at the playlist link in the description below and follow the previous videos to get to the same point, and then you can follow along with this tutorial with everybody else. So before we start creating the gates, I just want to talk about a couple of issues that you may have noticed so far, and a third issue which is really a non-issue that I want to describe to you as well. So the first issue is, you may have noticed when you've been in multiplayer mode that sometimes it doesn't spawn all of the vehicles in the map, and this is a problem because I noticed that the pickup vehicle that was provided in the vehicle variety pack had a setting which said don't spawn if two vehicles are in the same location. So to first of all show you the problem, and then I'll show you the fix. If you've got multiple player starts in your map, then delete all of them except one, and just put it in the middle of the map as well. Put the location as 0 and 0, because we'll be doing everything in the middle of the map in this particular video. And then go to your play settings and put 2 players, players list and server, new editor window, and click play. And what you'll notice is that the server spawns the vehicle, the client tries to spawn the vehicle in the same place and fails. So how can we fix this? Let's come out of play mode, and if you go to your world settings, if they're not on your screen here, go up to settings, world settings here, find your BP pickup pawn class and open it up. And what I noticed here is, if you make sure the class defaults is set and go down on the right hand side to the actor section, the default setting here was when you spawn, it says try to adjust location, don't spawn if still colliding. Well, because we've only got one player start at the moment, it's always one of these vehicles is always going to have a problem spawning in the same location. So we need to change this setting to try to adjust location but always spawn. Okay, compile that and save it. Now if we go into play mode, you have the 2 vehicles. Now you probably noticed that they collided with each other straight away, and we'll fix that later on because we'll have locations in random places around the map, so it won't be an issue in the future, but at least it stops us having the problem where one player can't actually play the game in a multiplayer environment. So that's number 1 issue fixed. And in fact, while we're here, let's just put a couple more player starts in for our testing. So go to your place actors section, find player start, and drag a couple in that are sort of nearby the first one. Okay, and now we've got sort of 3 player start locations that are roughly in the center of the map. Okay, that's issue number 1. Issue number 2, let's just go back to single player for this, is that when you're playing at the moment, the pitch control, you can go up and down and almost underneath the map, so there's nothing really restricting the pitch movement of your camera. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to restrict the pitch so that you can only go down to about here and only go up to, I don't know, maybe up to about here. Again, that you can adjust this to taste, but let me show you how you do that. So again, within our pickup location, what we want to do is on the begin play event, if you get the camera player camera manager is what we want. We can let's type player camera. This is it. Get player camera manager. And if you drag off that and type pitch, you've got these view pitch max and set view pitch min. So drag out twice so you get the max and the min. And what this allows you to do is effectively set the constraints of the pitch control for the camera. So what we can do is we can make the maximum minus 10 degrees and the minimum, let's say, minus 60. So what will happen is when the vehicle gets spawned, it'll get the camera manager and make sure that the pitches are constrained between these two values. So let's compile that, go into play mode, and now if I try and drag up and down, you see that I can't go lower than this, so I can't go underneath the vehicle. And again, you can adjust that how you want, but to me it's a much cleaner view of the vehicle as you're going around. So that was issue number 2. And the third issue, which isn't really an issue, but you may have noticed it, if you go into multiplayer mode again, so let's go to 2 players and go into play mode. What you may have noticed, let me see if I drive around here. Can you see how the trail isn't actually rendering properly? It's sort of rendering in an offset view. Yeah, you can see it's sort of rendering away from the car. And the reason for this is something to do with it running in editor mode for the multiplayer view. If you actually play it in standalone view, it won't be a problem. And if you play it as once you build the game, it won't be a problem either. It's only a problem in this sort of editor view. So it's not an issue. It's just a quirk of the way the surface trails works in editor mode. So don't worry if you see that. It's a problem that will go away when you build your game. So nothing to worry about. As I said, it's an issue that's a non-issue. All right, so those are the 3 issues I wanted to cover. And now let's get on with the main part of today's tutorial, which is to create our gates. And before we create the gate, I want to create some gate posts using a particle system. You saw in the intro, I had a sort of very familiar system where the gates were sort of particles on either side. So let's create that gate post first in the particle system. So go into your effects folder where you created your sand spray, and we'll create a new effects Niagara emitter from a template, and we'll use the fountain as a sort of base for this. Click finish, and we'll call this NE gate and go into it. And what I want is a sort of a column that's creating this effect. So let's change some of the things here. First of all, let's go to the sphere location and delete that. And in particle spawn, add a cylinder location. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll change the height of the cylinder to 600 and the radius to 50. So I want it taller but thinner. And now I want a few more particles in there so that it can be seen with dense particles from a distance. So let me go to my spawn rate and up that from 90 to 300. Okay, that's looking quite nice. Now I don't want it to be a fountain, I sort of want it to just have particles that are floating up. So in order to do that, let's take this velocity in cone, add velocity in cone and delete that. So now it's just spawning particles in the cylinder, but they're dropping down due to gravity. So go to the gravity force, and instead of it being minus 980, which is a standard sort of gravity, downwards gravity, I'm going to put in 200, which will be an upward force. And now we'll end up with particles that drift up in the air, which is the effect I want. And then last couple of things I want to do is change the color. So go to the initialize particle color, and I'm going to choose a nice light blue that will contrast with the desert sand. And finally, let's add in the particle update a little bit of noise just so that the particles swirl slightly. So go into particle update, do plus and search for curl noise force. It'll say there's an issue because it just wants to put it before the resolve forces, so just click fix issue. And you can play around with these, but I found that 40 and 50 for the parameters gave me a nice subtle movement of particles within this gate before it lifted up off to the heavens. So that is our gate post. Save that, close, and go back to your FX system. Every emitter needs a system in order to deploy it. So right click, FX, Niagara system, new system from selected emitter, and go down to your gate emitter and add it, finish, and we'll call it NS gate. So we now have a system that we can add in. So we've now got the gate post. What we want to do now is create a gate blueprint that we can spawn around the map. So let's go to the top level and let's create a new folder, and we'll call it gates. And in that folder, we'll create a new blueprint class, actor, and call it BP underscore gate. And open it up. So we have a blank canvas here. And what we want to do is we want to create two gate posts in here, one on the left, one on the right. And then we want to create a collision zone in the middle of the gates for our drivers to go through. So let's start off by adding the Niagara components, Niagara particle system. So let's call it gate. And in the system asset here on the right, choose our NS gate system. And if we pull out a bit, you can see there's the gate that we created. Let's just adjust the location relative to the route. So let's put the x-axis minus 250 and then the z 600, so that the base is at the base of the gate. And now we want, that's our left gate post. Now let's duplicate it. So select it over here, Control W, and in the location here, change the X location to 250, and we now have a gate on the right hand side as well. So we have our gate posts, and what we need to do now is put in a collision zone that triggers when the vehicle goes through the gate. So in order to do that, go to add component, go back to your scene route, add component, box collision, and we'll call this, actually it doesn't really matter what we call it, let's call it, let's leave it as box, that's fine. And we want to make sure that it encompasses the width and height of the gate. So in the shape, the X should be 300, the Z should be 600, and you can see it's actually buried into the ground. So let's raise the Z location to 600 as well. So now we have the box as high as the gate posts, and if we rotate around, the Y depth of 32 looks about right in order for the box to be about the same width as the gates. So now we have a collision zone that will be triggered when the vehicle passes through the gate. So that's the visible gate. Now we want to put an event on this box. To start off with, we'll just destroy the gate when a vehicle goes through it. So to do that, with the box selected, go down to the events, and we want this on component begin overlap event. This will get executed when anything goes through this, collides with this box. So for the moment, all we'll do is we'll drag off here and say destroy actor. So all we're doing at the moment is destroying this gate as soon as something goes through the collision zone. We'll obviously update this later on with a bit more sophisticated logic and scoring, but I like to do things in a stepwise fashion and test them out. So let's compile that and let's try it out. So go into the map, and here's our gate. Let's drag it onto the desert. So let's drag it there. Let's drag a couple more on here, on here. So we have 3 gates on the map, and let's just try it in single player mode at the moment. So go back down to 1 player and play. Okay, and there we have our gates. So they're around about 2 car widths. As we go through each one, it hits the collision zone and it destroys the gate. So the general logic is working there. Now I want to test it in multiplayer as well. So I'll go into play mode and choose 2 players. Play. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll go to the client so we can see the gates in the server view. So I'll drive to the gate here, and as I go through it, it disappears, and it also disappears in the server view as well. And the reason it's working here is because anything that is on the level is owned by the server and is maintained by the server. So we don't have to worry about multiplayer replication. We will have to worry about it a bit more when we spawn actors, but I'll cover that a bit later on in this video. So far so good. We have gates that are working on the level, but what I want to do now is I want to create a system which spawns gates randomly on the desert, and after a gate is destroyed, it then spawns a new gate in a new location. So let's delete the gates we've got on the map. They were just for testing purposes. And what we want to do now is create a gate spawning blueprint that will spawn the gates randomly at the right place and the right time. So let's create a new blueprint class in our gates folder, actor, and we'll call this BP gate spawner. And open this up. What I effectively want to do is create a box or a zone where gates are spawned from, or gates are spawned in. So really all I need in here, if I had a component, is another box collision zone. And I'm going to call this gate spawner. And you can either leave it like this or you can drag it up into the scene route just so you have the box only. And for now I'm going to create a box volume of 5,000 by 5,000 on the X and Y axis and 1,000 on the Z axis. So that will cover a small portion of the center of the map. Later on we'll make it larger so it covers almost the whole map, but this will make it easier to see the gates in our testing phase. So at the moment we have this spawning zone, and what I want to do is I want to use this to spawn gates within this box. So go to the event graph, and what I can do is let's get rid of those events. I'm going to create a new custom event, and I'm going to call it server spawn gate, and I want it to run on the server, and I want it to run reliably because I want gates always to be spawned on the server because it's a key gameplay activity. And in order to spawn it somewhere within this box, what I need to do is take this gate spawner box, so control, and I want to get the location, get world location. I also want to get the scaled box extent, that's the size of the box, and then there's this function called random point in bounding box. So what this useful feature does is it takes a box location and a box size, and it generates a random point in that box. So now we've got a location, a random location, we can spawn our gate. So let's drag off the spawn gate event and do spawn actor from class. Choose our gate, BP gate class, and we can drag out the location. This little transform here, or sorry, this little box here is transforming it from a location to a transform value, but that's just so it gives you rotation as well and scale. So now we have an event that will spawn a gate in a random location, but we need to call this spawn location. So let's do it on the begin play event. So event begin play, and we'll do server spawn gate. So when this starts in the level, it will call this event, and the event will look at the box, generate a random point, and spawn a gate there. So let's see if this works. Come back to desert. Again, we'll just be in single player mode. Actually, we're not in multiplayer mode. It doesn't really matter though. So let's have a look around. Are there any gates around? Can't see one. Let's so I know the first problem here is we haven't actually put our gate spawner in the level. So we've got this gate spawner which has got the logic to spawn gates, but we need to have that gate spawner in the level in order for it to fire off that event. So let's drag the gate spawner into the desert, put it in location 0, 0, so it's at the center of the map. And then you'll notice that it's sort of buried in the desert at the moment. So let's drag it up and sort of just out of the desert. Okay, now let's try playing. And if we look around, oh, we've got our cars spawned on top of each other at the moment. Actually, let's come out of here and let's play again. Let's go into single player mode. Keep it simple for now. Going to play, have a look around. Is there a gate? Ah, there is, but it's up in the air. So that's our first problem, is that that box is three-dimensional, and so it's going to generate it anywhere sort of from 0 to 1,000 in height in that box, and we want it pinned to the ground. So we need to think, how are we going to take that random location and we're going to put it on the landscape. And fortunately, there's quite an easy way of doing that, which we'll do now. So what we'll do is we will go back to our gate spawner, and what we need to do is generate this random point in the box, but then do a line trace downwards until we find the landscape, and that is the location where we want to generate the gate. So let's move this spawn over a little bit more. Let's get rid of this conversion for now. So here we've got the random point in the bounding box. The next thing we want to do, if we drag from the event and start typing line trace, you can do line trace for objects, and make sure it's connected to your spawn actor as well. And so the line trace for objects takes a start point, so this is our random point up in the air. And then the end point, we want to look from this point directly downwards for a certain number of units. And what we'll do is we'll take this random point, do minus vector, and effectively we'll take, say, 10,000 units off the Z axis. So that will be pointing directly down from the random point, 10,000 units. And as long as you put your box within 10,000 units of the desert, then it should hit a landscape point, no problem. So that is our end point, directly downwards. And then the object types you want to search for, if you drag out here and do make array. And we want to look for world static items, of which the landscape is a static item. So that's by default put in there, so that should be fine. So that will get our random point, send a trace directly downwards 10,000 units and look for world static items, which is the landscape, and will give us an output location. So if we split the structure bin here, we have various different options for what it hits, but there's an out hit location, and we can take that out hit location and plug it into the spawn actor transform. And there's our conversion from location to transform. So now it should have converted this point in the air to a point on the ground. So let's see if this works. Compile and save, and go into here, and there's our random gate, which has now been pinned to the ground, which we can drive through. Okay, so that still works, but now if we look around, there's no more gates, because it's only spawned one gate at the start of the match. What we want to do is we want it to spawn a new gate every time it goes through and destroys an existing gate. So let's come out of here. Actually, let's do a multiplayer. We should always test and test and test as we go through this. Let's do a multiplayer test. Make sure this is working. So do 2 players, go into play mode. Okay, so we have gate just behind us. Let's go to the client view. Now, there's a problem. There's no gate there. And you may be confused at this point thinking, well, hang on a second, but when I spawned the gate the first time, that worked. But there's a big difference here. When we did the first test of the gates, we put them on the level. And because we put them on the level, they were loaded in every client. Now we're spawning the gate on the server. We need to make sure that it's a replicated object, so it appears on all the clients. So let's come out of here, go to our gate, and if you look at the class defaults, you've got in the replication section, you've got these options here. So at the moment, we don't have replicate set to true. So when the server spawns that gate, it only exists on the server. So we need to click replicates so that that gate then appears on the clients as well. So that should be all we need to do to get that to work. Let's compile that. Go into our view. Right, I'm on the server. Let's look around. There's the gate. Go to the client view and have a look around. And there's the gate. So it's now replicating. And if I drive through the gate, it destroys them on both because it's owned by the server and replicates the destruction of the gate. So that's good. We've now got a multiplayer working, but we've still got the problem of once the gate gets destroyed, we want to spawn a new gate. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to effectively allow the gate to choose. At this point, when the vehicle goes through the gate, before I destroy the gate, I want to spawn a new gate. So really here, I just want to put an event to call that server spawn gate again. Now the only problem is that I don't know where the gate spawner is from this BP gate, but that's easily solved. I could when I create the gate, I could pass it the reference to the gate spawner so that it knows to call that gate spawner to spawn the next gate. So to do that, we'll create a new variable on the gate. I'm going to call it gate spawner. And we want to make that instance editable and expose on spawn so that when we spawn this, we can pass this reference in. So compile and save that. And now go back to the gate spawner, and you might need to go to File, Refresh All Nodes. Now in our spawn actor, we've exposed this gate spawner variable, but actually I've noticed I haven't defined it correctly. It's defined as a Boolean. So go back to the gate and make sure that the variable type is gate spawner. and you want to choose the object reference. Okay, now save that. Refresh the nodes. Okay, now it's the right type, BP gate spawner. And all we want to do here is pass in a reference to self. So this is the gate spawner that's calling this logic. And all I'm doing is when I spawn spawn a gate, I pass the gate spawner reference in so that it can then call this spawn gate function again when it destroys the gate. So that's the last thing we need to do. Go back to the gate and drag in our control, drag in our gate spawner reference that got created. Drag out server spawn gate and stick the logic in here. We have to spawn it before we destroy the actor. Now if you think about this, if you destroy the actor, potentially you've destroyed all of this blueprint logic as well. So you can't do anything after you destroy an actor. You might get away with it because of a lag in garbage collection, but you certainly can't guarantee it. So always make sure you do your activities before you destroy an actor. So this should now spawn our first gate. Let's look at the logic here. Spawns the first gate in begin play when the level loads. So that's our first one. And then when we go through the gate, it uses that gate spawner reference to then call the next server spawn gate and destroy the first one. Now, before we go any further, we need to consider the thorny issue of events in a multiplayer environment, in particular on component overlap. Is it running on the server, is it running on the clients, or is it running on both? Because if you look at this event at the moment, we only want to process this once when a vehicle goes through the gate. We don't want to spawn gates multiple times, we just want to spawn another gate on the server. So let's have a look and see where this event is running. And the easiest way to test this out is I'll disconnect the current spawn and destroy events that we've got going on, and I'm just going to do a print string. So this will fire when that on component overlap begins. And I'm going to go into play mode with my 2 players. And if I drive in the gate as the server, you can see that that event fired 2 times, once on the client and once on the server. Let's do it on the client as well, see if it's the same. So I'm going on up to the gate, and as soon as I go through the trigger, you see server and client 1 do that print string. So what that tells me is that this event is being fired twice. And if you think about it, the gate, we replicated it. So the gate exists on the server and all the clients. So it's effectively being called on every instance of that gate. But we only want to process this server spawn gate once on the server. So how do we do that? There are two ways of doing this. One way of doing this is to use the isServer test, which returns a Boolean, true or false, and then we can just put a branch with B here, and if it's true, it means we're running on the server. Let's just do a print string and prove this. So let's run this again. Find my gate. Drive through it. And now it's just executed on the server, which is what we wanted. So that's one way of doing it. And then another way of doing it is I could use this switch has authority node. Now I could do a whole tutorial on this, but what that basically asks is who has the authority on this particular actor. And most actors, actors that are on the level, actors that are spawned, your pawn, are controlled by the server. So if you say you want the authority to do the next events, it will usually be the server. There are some rare edge cases, but obviously this is a little bit leaner than having to do is server and the branch. So most people use this switch as authority. And let's test this out and make sure this is only server as well. So I'll drive through the gate and it's firing on the server. Let me just test it on the client as well, just to make sure. And that is firing on the server as well. So all we need to do now is remove our print string and reconnect our server spawn gate to the authority node. So what's happening now is the component overlap will happen when the vehicle drives through. We'll say, is this the server event? And then we'll spawn a single gate on the server and then destroy the actor. This is a particularly pernicious sort of event, because without this it may have worked, and the reason why is because we're using this destroy actor. We may have destroyed the replicated actor before it fired the event, so it may have worked sometimes and not other times. So you've got to be very careful of this in multiplayer environments. So let's carry on with testing and see how we get on. Go into play mode. We see a gate. There's a gate over there. Let's go to the client view as well and turn around so we can see it. Okay, so back to the, actually let's stay in the client mode, that's fine, and drive around. And when I go through the gate, it should spawn a new gate and destroy this one. So, we've got an error. Infinite loop detected on server. Okay, I had to pause the video for a few minutes there to figure out why I was getting this infinite loop error. And it turned out that the problem was that my gate spawner volume was not high enough above the ground, so that it was effectively generating a point underneath the landscape, and it was colliding with the landscape and trying to spawn another gate, etc., etc., and that was causing the infinite loop. So to fix that problem, if you had the same thing, go to your gate spawner, go to the left perspective view, make sure you've got the gate spawner selected here and focus on it, and you can see there's the desert landscape here. Just make sure that you lift it up so that it is above every point in the landscape, and also make sure that it's not so high that it can't do the line trace down 10,000 units as well. So that was what was causing the problem. Now if I go into play mode and if I look around, there's the gate. If I drive through the gate, it disappears and it should generate a new gate in a new random location, which it has done. Okay, so that's all working now. The gate spawning is working, and when we drive through the gate, it then calls the gate spawn on the next location. So last thing I want to show you today. So this is the we've constrained the gates to a very small area in the center of the map. I want to now extend the gate spawner to cover almost the whole of the map, and then I'll show you another issue that we need to finish. We need to resolve, and then that'll be the end of today's tutorial before we move on to scoring in the next tutorial. So let's come out of play mode, go to our gate spawner, and if we open it up, to the gate spawner box collision. So we'd set the X and Y to 5,000, 5,000. The map is actually 50,000 by 50,000. So we want to have it slightly smaller. So 45,000 by 45,000 should do it. Save, compile and save. And if we go back to our desert view and let's have a look at this gate spawner from the let's look at it from a top view. Zoom out a bit, and you can see that it covers almost to the corner of the map, but we don't want the gates right in the corner, so that should work just fine for us. So I said I'd show you the final issue we need to resolve here. So if we go into play mode, and let's put these side by side, these screens. So on the server, first of all, let's drive up and see if we can find the gate. By looking around, you have to go to a sort of a high point and look around. Remember, it could be anywhere in the map now, so I can see it over in the distance there. So let's just drive up to the next ridge. So there it is in front of me. Let's just stop there and go to the client view and drive in the same direction. So I can see there's the car ahead of me, the server vehicle. Let's go up and join it, but I can't see the gate. It should be there, but I can't see it. So let's carry on going in that direction. So you can see in the server view, I've just passed the car. I'm heading towards the gate, but it's still not visible. It should be there. Let's get a bit closer. And now it's just appeared. So do you see it just suddenly appeared? So if I go backwards, still there. But there's a point at which it disappears. And this is the concept of network culling. If you think of a lot of games, things that are in the distance you don't need to see until you get within a certain radius of them. So this is usually a good thing, but for this map we want to be able to see the gate from a vast distance, and we're only going to have one gate at a time, so it's not going to cause a huge network or graphics issue. So let's see if we can fix this last issue. What we need to do is we need to look at the gate, and if we go to the class defaults and the replication section, there is this net cull distance square, and it looks like it's quite a high value. It's 225 million, but because it's a square of value, it's a square of 15,000, which means that you're only going to be able to see 1,500 meters away. We want it to be always visible, and luckily there's this always relevant flag we can tick, and that means that it will always be replicated no matter what distance it is. So that should solve the problem. Let's compile and save and have a look. So let's go to the server first and see if we can find the there's the gate just over on that ridge. So let's just park ourselves up there. Now switch to the client view and come up on the same ridge, and hopefully, yeah, we can see it straight away. The gate is visible straight away, so there's no restriction now on the culling of the gate. And if we actually go through it, let's just quickly test once we've gone through whether it disappears on the server as well. Yeah, disappears on both. We should probably test it out on 2 or 3 players as well, but I'll leave you to do that. And we'll be off to find the next gate. So I hope you found today's tutorial useful. We had a couple of issues along the way, but as I've always said, part of development is having problems and being able to solve them. In the next couple of tutorials, I'm going to add scoring to the game, and I really want to make sure this works in multiplayer, so I'm going to be paying particular attention to how the scoring works in multiplayer. It's why I've spread it over 2 tutorials, because I want to go in depth in doing this properly. I've seen a lot of tutorials that show multiplayer scoring in a very odd way, and I want it to be event driven rather than to rely on tick events or delays to get things working. So I'm going to talk you through exactly how not to do it and how to do it properly in these next videos. So in the meantime, look after yourself and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.